15 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour, and Chris Lenois back with you on the Green Mountain Mornings program. Spending our Friday 8 o'clock hour, however, as we customarily do, with the deputy editor of the Commons, Randy Holhut, joining us from his compound in Dummerston. Good morning to you, Randy.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Joyce. Thanks for tuning in. Great issue of the Commons this week. Especially, I found the Voices section to be provocative, and all the different voices on that page with the silhouette of Donald Trump and the big question, how, at the top, and then perspectives from Tim Kipp, McLean Gander, as well as yourself, Randy, on the front page of the Voices section of the Commons. And reading your op-ed, as well as the title of it, The Triumph of the Stupid, I'm getting the sense that the longer you're living with this election, the madder you're getting.
Oh, yes. I am extremely disappointed in my fellow Americans that they would do such a thing to my country. And that being there with Tim Kipp and Matt Gander, that's like Andrew Miller, Dylan Betances, and our oldest Chapman there.
Yeah.
We were throwing heat.
Certainly a nice grouping. I was saying actually earlier on the show, it's kind of like you have all the different aspects of the human spectrum there. You have Professor Gander kind of providing the intellectual, then you have you kind of providing the emotional, and then you have Tim kind of providing the physical when he's talking about the political economy and how to take action. And that's not even taking into account somebody like Dan DeWalt on the inside of the section.
Yes, I mean, clearly it was topic A all over Brattleboro and Windham County for the last week, and there was pretty much no way we could avoid addressing it. But everyone's still kind of dazed and in shock and trying to deal with the fallout from what's going to happen in the next 4 years. And that's the thing. I mean, I lived through Reagan, we lived through W, and this is going to be infinitely worse than those two combined.
Well, yeah. I mean, you talk about Reagan and W, and you're talking about disagreements in policy, disagreements in how to carry the direction forward. It's a whole other threat involved here when you're talking about, as you say, the triumph of the stupid, and these people who have believed hook, line, and sinker that this person who was given a fortune and basically always lived a life of privilege is somehow going to stick up for these working class people. There just really is no precedent for that in at least our recent electoral history.
Well, this is a case of if you've been trained to hate people and you've been told who to hate and told how to hate them and why to hate them, this is what the whirlwind you're going to reap. You know, you're supposed to hate those darn liberal elitists, those intellectuals, and then, of course, all those people who are different. Everyone who's involved, who's alive and has a conscience and feels for their country, is wondering how, why, what can we do, and people are working to try and figure out how to protect the vulnerable people in this country that are going to be the targets of what's been unleashed with this election.
Yeah. So you specifically, or Jeff specifically, sought out Professor Gander, specifically sought out Tim Kipp. Was it that in terms of you thought out who can provide the different perspectives on this issue in the best way possible?
Well, I know with Tim Kipp, that came right after the election. That,
right.
You know, most of this was unsolicited.
Okay.
That just people who are worried and looking for a way to express their fear, their anger, their belief that maybe it's something can be done about this.
Yeah, including yourself.
Well, for me, it's just pure rage. Because having gone through it twice, I really don't want a third time.
Yeah. Well, and this time, certainly the concern being also the control of Congress and the ability to appoint a Supreme Court justice and having everything working in a direction that seems to be one that many people in this community, in this listening area, think is the wrong direction to go in. Now, anger needs to turn into action, and Wendy Levy's article on the front page of this week's edition of the Commons, talking to H.B. Lozito of Green Mountain Crossroads and talking about how they are, and fortification, I think, was the absolute right word to use in the headline of that article about the LGBTQ community and the steps they are taking, despite the fact that the president-elect has said, well, marriage equality is a settled issue in my mind. I actually had HB on the show yesterday and we talked a little bit about that marriage equality is only one aspect of what this community needs to protect itself against.
Yes, and even Trump's words carry a little weight, because in the case of what's ahead, it's not so much Trump, because we know he's lazy and not terribly well informed, but the people who are on his team and the people who are allied with him know exactly what they want, and exactly what they want is to kind of repeal the last 100 years of political and social and economic progress for everybody else.
Yeah, and we're starting to see that Trump team take shape. I think I just heard right before we went on the air, Randy, that Lieutenant General Flynn has accepted the National Security Advisor position, and I think I also heard that Jeff Sessions has accepted the Attorney General's position. I heard a couple different appointments that were confirmed here this morning. So we are starting to see who exactly is going to be governing over the next 4 years, assuming we get past the Electoral College on December 19th, right?
Well, that's a pipe dream that that people are going to come to their senses and overrule.
Yeah, I think
their votes. But as we see right now, popular vote, Clinton had ended up, or so far, about 2 million more votes. But
right. Yep. Counting California, and people expect it to come out to about 2 million more votes, and we'll continue to have opposition conversations anytime that we hear thing worthy of opposing, which seems to be a lot of things these days under President-elect Trump. Lots more to talk about in this week's edition of The Commons. We'll get to that with Randy Holhut, Deputy Editor, after the bottom of the hour news break. 21 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour, Chris Lenois back with you on the Green Mountain Mornings program, and continuing my conversation with Randy Holhut, Deputy Editor of The Commons, your reader-supported, award-winning independent news and views source for Windham County, free on stands every Wednesday, online at commonsnews.org. That's where you can go and make a contribution and become a member of this fine institution that brings us so much good news each and every week. Randy, while we were on the break there, got a call from a listener who was also a reader of the Commons, and saying he was just enjoying digesting everything that he was seeing in this week's edition, including your op-ed on the Voices page. And he was looking at a couple of different paragraphs in there and was wanting to kind of make sure, well, he was seeing it as a contradiction. And when I read them, I could see where he's thinking about that, but I don't necessarily, I think it's pretty easy to distinguish here. In one section of your column, you say, one believes in government as a tool to help us create a more perfect union. The other sees it as the enemy. Now, directly next to that in the column, obviously it's a little bit further down if people read, but directly to the right of that is a paragraph saying, it is the difference between people who are willing to be governed and people who wish to be ruled. And he was seeing those two paragraphs as being contradictory to each other. I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that.
Well, the way government works is that we agree to share power, and that we, at coming together, we the people, come to certain agreements on how things should be. The classic Lincoln quote of, government being, allowing the people to do what they can do on their own, but when people can't do on their own, that's when we come together and call it government.
Right.
And that's the kind of social contract we operate under in a civilized society, as opposed to those who would rather just have somebody make all the decisions for them and not have to be bothered with the work of government. Right.
Yeah, I think that there's when you think about these people who understand there is a need for a government, but always wanting to treat it as your opponent, no matter what you're trying to do. And I think that's what the mentality's been. I mean, probably even before Ronald Reagan, but he's certainly one who's been credited as creating that sort of animosity or that adversarial relationship between government and citizens with his famous, the worst word you can hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, right?
Yeah, and that's been one of the more destructive mythologies of the last 40 years. But that's the design, of Republicans say government doesn't work, and they do go about trying to prove that point.
Yeah, indeed. Now, we talked about with the front page story about Green Mountain Crossroads working with the LGBTQ community here to prepare for any possible outcomes from the election, any rulings and guidelines that are set forth as far as being somebody who has to identify as a certain gender and workshop that they're doing next week. Struck me that a story that had your byline on it at the bottom of the fold, the meeting you covered for the Transportation Board and discussing of the rail plans, not only here in Vermont, but in Massachusetts, there's a lot of implications there from this election as well for plans that they have to improve rail service here in the northeastern part of the United States.
Yeah, I was interested in that and going to that meeting because, it was the day after the election, so I was curious to see, who'd show up.
Right.
Feeling that, what's the point of doing this if all the funding's going to be cut? But
right.
The state has the funding already, thanks to all the people in other states that rejected the Obama stimulus money. But Vermont was happy, and Massachusetts was happy to grab it to improve their rail systems. And there are a lot of things that are about to happen that could really have implications for livability in Windham County in terms of having transportation options, namely the possibility that Brattleboro could be part of a commuter run that right now is slated to go between Greenfield and Springfield, Massachusetts. If Vermont kicks in some money, perhaps the trains will go to Brattleboro, and you could have several trains a day going back and forth between Brattleboro and Springfield, and be able to connect the trains to Boston and New York from there.
That makes a lot of sense when you think about some of the commuters who come from the southern part of New England up here and vice versa, people who travel down to Massachusetts and could create more opportunities there. It heartens me to hear, because it was like, boy, you mentioned that this meeting happened in Brattleboro the day after the election, and you made no mention at all of a conversation around the election. So the money is settled. It's not an issue of funding at this point, and that's certainly great news. And there's nothing they can do necessarily, they being this amorphous, federal body, whatever it becomes, to try and curtail efforts to do this kind of work either, right?
Well, not right now. In terms of say the Amtrak service in Vermont, Vermont's been paying for it for all these years, and it's a question more of not so much Donald Trump, but Governor Phil Scott and his administration on how much funding they want to continue devoting to rail. But there's a lot of, it's not just the people in the Brattleboro area that want better passenger service to New York and Boston. It's the people in western Vermont that would like better rail service between Rutland and Burlington, and not have to drive Route 7 to get to Burlington.
Yeah, that western side of the state, and there's actually been more upgrades to our side of the state, if I'm remembering correctly,
yes.
and it's kind of like they did ours first, and now that western side of the state, that whole corridor of New York up to Rutland, up to Burlington, and then, wow, wouldn't it be great to have a train that went to Montreal again, and that opportunity to travel up to another country in such a beautiful cosmopolitan city as Montreal by train and not have to worry about driving over the border and all that stuff? I mean,
and that's still being worked out. Maybe by the end of this decade, but it's a matter of our government and the Canadian government working on security. Mm-hmm. Between the two countries.
Yeah.
And then work rules for the train crews, and then fixing the track.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of other hurdles to clear there, but I don't see Phil Scott as being somebody who would be against that. And when he talks about wanting to improve commerce and tourism and this kind of commuter economy, to me, this whole upgrade of rail service seems to be something that he would still prioritize.
Yeah, and when you look at the transportation picture in Brattleboro now, that there's more. Bus services this year suddenly improved with the daily bus to Boston, and now 2 daily buses to New York and the Vermonter ridership. The Brattleboro is second only to Essex Junction as the top station for passengers boarding and departing.
Yeah,
this is a big deal.
It is, and it does. It feels good. It feels like Brattleboro is being the hub that it always claims to be when you have this much activity of people flowing in and out and transitioning through. That was a story with your byline on it. Photographs for Olga Peters' story also have your credit on them. You accompanied her to Melrose Terrace, watching the folks who have been living there, some of them for a long, long time, saying goodbye to that community space, some of them moving to Red Clover Commons. And the overall picture I got from that, and the overall impression was, if you look at it as, the kind of 5 stages of grief, it seems like most of the people in Melrose Terrace are certainly, there's a lot of real sadness there, but most of them have come to terms with this. They're at the acceptance stage.
Well, there's not much choice in the matter.
Yeah.
The decision's been made that Melrose it can't exist anymore in its current form, and it's kind of a shame because these are really sturdy, well-built housing units, and to lose that many units is in a town that's already experiencing a shortage of rental properties is really hurts. And I know the Red Clover Commons helps alleviate some of that shortage, but it doesn't alleviate all of it.
No, it doesn't.
It's a nice little community Melrose has been, and it's never quite totally recovered from the flooding from Irene.
Yeah, I remember helping a friend of mine's mother move out of Melrose Terrace prior to Tropical Storm Irene, and quite honestly, I had never had cause to go back there and see what a neighborhood it was, right? I mean, and that's
a neighborhood.
That's part of what they're losing too, is a little bit of that autonomy of having a place that really you're not sharing walls with people, you're not sharing hallways, and as modern a space as Red Clover seems to be, that's the kind of thing that a lot of people as they age and want to, and I like the term that is used in all the different ways that Red Clover has made accommodations to allow people to age in place. People are going to miss that sort of autonomy that they had at Melrose Terrace.
Yeah, but of course the excitement of moving into a brand new apartment for some of the folks is certainly a good thing.
Yeah, and it looks like it's a great facility. I mean, I'm only seeing it from the outside, but I live up on that end of the town, and I'm really impressed with how quickly it's going, and the aesthetics from the outside look nice. I imagine we must be getting close soon where they'll start inviting media in to tour around, or maybe they have already.
Next month or so. All
right, we'll keep an eye out for that in the pages of the Commons. Always good to keep an eye out on the sports page as we wind down the fall season. And Bellows Falls, the football team, winning the state championship over Burton in quite dramatic fashion.
Yes, the Malcolm Butler-like play there by Mr. Kendall.
Yeah. So I know you weren't able to go up to Rutland. So
between the radio and television, getting a good feel for what happened up there. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get up there, but Bellows Falls did a really good job against a team that was one of the best in the state. They didn't have their best day. Burton did a lot of mistakes and penalties, and their all-star quarterback Griff Stallcup was not as sharp as he could have been, and BF just was well prepared for what they were facing and executed their game plan quite well. You know what they're going to do: run, and they ran. But their defense, especially the secondary, did its job. And then when Brendan Kendall did the Malcolm Butler-esque play of the interception in the last seconds of the game to preserve the win for the Terriers, was quite exciting.
Yeah, I forgot you said you were going to listen to that game on the radio. I was like, he got such a detailed description of that final play. It was like you were there, and I remember you saying you weren't going to be able to make it up there for the game. So thank goodness for radio, right, Randy?
Radio and, of course, our friends at WCAX.
Yes, and WCX getting the footage there. It's always great to have these media partnerships that allow us to have these conversations with you each and every week, and also to have BCTV in here filming them so they go on the Brattleboro Community Television channels and on their website. Until next weekend, Randy, next Friday, hope you have a good one. Oh, actually, we won't be talking next Friday. It's Thanksgiving, so you get a little break from me.
Oh, well, I get a little break from that. Well, have a good Thanksgiving, everyone, and we'll pick it up in December.
We'll pick it up in December. All right. Take care. That was Randy Holhut, Deputy Editor of the Commons, your reader-supported news and views source for Windham County. Online at commonsnews.org. We'll be back to wrap up this edition of Green Mountain Mornings right after these messages.